January 17, 1944, Eastern Front, Vitebsk Sector, 4:23 a.m. The temperature, a serious, bone-chilling -24 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside a melancholic, shattered bell tower, just 418 yards behind German lines, a man lies motionless. For 8 hours, without fire, without movement. Private First Class Matthias Krüger, 68th Infantry Division, 27 years old, a sniper. Before him, visible through his Zeiss scope, the Soviet lines, 1,250 yards away. In the next 9 hours, this man will achieve the impossible. Eliminate 3 high-ranking Soviet officers, from a distance considered technically unfeasible. In freezing cold, in darkness, with only 3 shots. This is not fiction. This is documented history. And the truth is more terrifying than any movie. Krüger exhales slowly, controlled. His breath condenses in the frigid air, but he turns his head slightly to prevent the vapor from betraying his position. The Kar 98K rifle rests perfectly steady on a frozen sandbag. The weapon itself has cooled to -18 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold metal, cold wood, cold hands. But Krüger's fingers are not numb, not trembling. Calm, because he has been preparing for 8 hours. 8 hours of mental focus, 8 hours of wind assessment, 8 hours of calculation. For 3 shots, 3 lives, 3 seconds that will alter the course of the war. Leading up to the mission. Why did Krüger do this? Why would a single man risk his life for 3 shots? The answer lies 3 days prior, January 14, 1944. German radio intelligence intercepts Soviet communication, encrypted but not perfectly. The message, Operational Briefing, January 17, 0500 hours, Command Post Sector 7B. In attendance, Lieutenant Colonel Alexei Volkov, commander of the 47th Rifle Regiment. Major Boris Antonov, deputy commander of the 18th Rifle Division. Lieutenant Colonel Dmitry Sokolov, chief of staff, 12 Guards Corps. Subject, Massive Winter Offensive, planned for January 22nd. Objective, breakthrough of German lines near Vitebsk. Expected losses, 12,000 soldiers. Expected success, encirclement of 35,000 German troops. Captain Werner Stahl, intelligence officer of the 68th Infantry Division, reads the decrypted radio transmission and understands instantly. If this offensive launches, fearful, the entire division is doomed. 35,000 men, surrounded, without supplies, in the Russian winter. Death is certain. But if the 3 officers planning this offensive are eliminated before it begins, there's a chance, a slim chance, a desperate chance. Stahl calls for Krüger. Krüger is in an ice-cold bunker, cleaning his rifle. Stahl explains the situation. 1,250 yards distance. At night, -24 degrees Fahrenheit. 3 targets, within minutes. Because the moment the first shot rings out, the Soviets will be alerted. Krüger asks only one question. When? Stahl replies, January 17th, 0500 hours. Krüger nods. I need 8 hours of preparation. No interruptions. Stahl nods back. You have them. Why Krüger? Out of 2,400 soldiers in the division, why this man? The answer lies in his background. Born on April 3, 1916, in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, Bavaria. Son of a hunter, raised in the Alps, learned to shoot at the age of 7. Not at targets, at animals, moving animals, in wind, in snow, at dusk. His father taught him 1 shot, 1 hit, no second chances. Otherwise, the animal suffers. This philosophy shaped Krüger. 1 shot, 1 life. Respect. 1938, drafted into the German army. infantry, average soldier. But during a shooting exercise in October 1939, something stood out. Krüger hit 47 out of 50 targets at 656 yards distance with a standard Kar 98K, without a scope, in the wind. The instructor asked, "How do you do that?" Krüger replied, "I feel the wind. I hear the bullet. I see the trajectory." The instructor sent him to sniper school. March to July 1940, Grafenvora training area, sniper training. Krüger learned ballistics, wind compensation, temperature effects, Coriolis effect at extreme distances, psychology of waiting, control of breath, control of heartbeat, slowing down time in the moment of the shot. He graduated third out of 84 candidates. Not first, not second, third. Because Krüger didn't want to break records, he wanted to survive. And records attract attention. Eastern Front, 1941 to 1943. Krüger fought in Smolensk, Vitebsk, Rzhev. 89 confirmed kills. Not the highest number. Matthias Hetzenauer had 345. Josef Allerberger had 257. But Krüger's kills had something special. 89 shots, 89 hits, 100% hit rate. No wasted ammunition, no missed targets. Every shot a life, every shot a purpose. That made him valuable, not his quantity, his quality. January 14th, 1944, 6:47 p.m. Krüger receives the order. He goes to his bunker, packs his equipment. Kar 98K, serial number 4738, built in 1943 by Mauser Oberndorf. Zeiss 6X scope, adjusted for 0 at 875 yards. 15 rounds. 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser. Armor-piercing steel core bullet. Each round weighed, each calibrated to 11.5 grams. Deviation less than 0.1 grams, because at 1,250 yards distance, 0.2 grams difference means 6 inches of deviation, and 6 inches means life or death. Krüger also checks the weather conditions. Temperature, minus 24 degrees Fahrenheit. Air pressure, 1,021 hectopascals. Wind, 4 miles per hour from the northeast. But wind is not constant. Wind changes every 3 minutes. Therefore, Krüger won't just measure once, he will measure continuously. Through snowflake movement, through smoke movement from Soviet stoves, through the movement of grass on the front line. Wind is his enemy and his tool. January 16th, 10 p.m. Fearful, Krüger leaves the German line, alone. Nobody accompanies him, because 2 men make twice as much noise, twice as much movement, twice as much risk. He carries 50 pounds of equipment: rifle, ammunition, water, jerky, blanket, binoculars, notebook, pencil, and one thing that is unusual: a pocket watch, not for the time, but for the second hand, to measure his heartbeat. Because at 1,250 yards distance, a heartbeat at the wrong moment can shift the shot by 3 inches. Krüger must lower his heartbeat to under 50 beats per minute in the moment of the shot. He moves through no man's land, 418 yards between the lines, frozen, silent, fearful, dead silent. Only the wind and the crunching of snow under boots. But Krüger doesn't crunch. He walks on tiptoes, slowly, 1 step per minute. 418 yards in 6 hours, from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. 6 hours where every step could be death. Soviet patrols, Soviet snipers, minefields. But Krüger knows the way, because he has reconnoitered it for 4 nights. 4 nights where he mapped the terrain meter by meter, every crater, every wire, every mine. Now, this preparation pays off. 4:23 a.m. January 17th. Krüger reaches the bell tower, destroyed by artillery in December 1943. Only 3 walls remain standing, but that's enough. He climbs the broken staircase, carefully, testing each step, because one creak, one crack, one sound, and he's dead. Reaching the top, he sets up his position. Sandbag in front of him, filled with frozen sand, hard as stone. He places the rifle on it, not directly. First a cloth, then the rifle, because metal on metal makes noise, and fearful noise kills. Through the scope, Krüger sees the Soviet command post, 1,143 meters away. A half-destroyed stone house, 2 stories, east side intact, west side partially collapsed. In the upper story, eastern window, a light burns. A weak light, candlelight perhaps, or an oil lamp. Oh, that's the target. That's where the 3 officers will meet at 5 a.m. Krüger has 37 minutes. 37 minutes to prepare. 37 minutes to measure the wind. 37 minutes to control his breathing. 37 minutes to mentally visualize the shot. Because when the moment comes, there's no time to think, only reaction, muscle memory, instinct. But here's the desperate problem. 1,143 meters is way beyond the effective range of the Kar-98K. Officially, the maximum effective range is 800 meters. Beyond that, accuracy is not guaranteed. German snipers like Josef Allerberger said in post-war interviews, up to 400 meters, headshot guaranteed. Up to 600 meters, chest shot guaranteed. Over 600 meters, hit possible, but not certain. And 1,143 meters, that was a matter of luck, or skill at a level that only a few can reach. Krüger knows this. He knows that at 1,143 meters distance, the bullet has a flight time of 1.8 seconds.
In that time, the bullet falls 6.4 meters due to gravity, is pushed aside by the wind, is influenced by temperature. The velocity of the bullet leaving the barrel, 760 meters per second. The velocity at the target, 312 meters per second. Over 50% energy loss. The trajectory is not a straight line. It's a parabola, a complex, wind and temperature-dependent curve. But Krüger has something others don't. He has made mental calculations thousands of times in his head, without paper, without a calculator. He visualizes the trajectory, sees the bullet in his mind, how it leaves the barrel, how it rises, how it reaches its peak at 287 meters distance, how it falls after that, how the wind pushes it from right to left. A 7-kilometer northeast wind means a lateral deviation of 47 centimeters at 1.8 seconds flight time. Krüger must aim 47 centimeters to the right, not left, right, because the wind is pushing the bullet to the left. And then there's the temperature, minus 31 degrees Celsius. Cold air is denser. Denser air means more air resistance. More air resistance means a slower bullet. A slower bullet means a stronger drop. At minus 31 degrees, the bullet falls an additional 22 centimeters more than at 15 degrees Celsius. So Krüger must compensate not only 6.4 meters, but 6.62 meters, a difference of 22 centimeters, the difference between a fearful headshot and a miss. But there's more. The weapon itself is cold, minus 28 degrees. Cold metal shrinks. The barrel is 0.4 millimeters shorter than at room temperature. That sounds insignificant, but at 1,143 meters, 0.4 millimeters barrel shortening means a deviation of 11 centimeters at the target. Krüger knows this and compensates by aiming slightly higher, 11 centimeters higher. 4:47 a.m. Krüger hears voices, quietly, far away. But in the silent winter night, voices carry far. He looks through the scope, sees movement. 3 men approaching the command house. Soviet officers. recognizable by their long coats, by their peaked caps, by the way they walk. Confidently, not hunched over like normal soldiers. Officers don't fear snipers because they think they're too far away. 1,143 meters.
Sarcastic. No one can hit from that distance. No one would even try. Krüger watches them through the scope. The first officer, tall, about 1.85 meters, broad shoulders, beard. That's Lieutenant Colonel Alexei Volkov, age estimated 43 years, commander of the 47th Rifle Regiment, responsible for 2,800 soldiers, a veteran of Stalingrad, bearer of the Order of the Red Banner, a capable commander, a dangerous enemy. The second officer, medium height, about 1.72 meters, slim, glasses. That's Major Boris Antonov, age estimated 37 years, deputy commander of the 18th Rifle Division, responsible for logistics and planning. Not a frontline soldier, but a brain. The man who plans offensives, the man who finds weaknesses, the man who sends 12,000 soldiers into attack, knowing that 4,000 will die. A necessary man, a terrible man. The third officer, short, about 1.65 meters, stocky, bald head. That's Lieutenant Colonel Dmitry Sokolov, age estimated 49 years, Chief of Staff of the 12th Guards Corps, the oldest, the most experienced, the most dangerous, because he planned Operation Bagration in June 1944, the operation that will destroy 28 German divisions, the operation that will encircle 400,000 German soldiers. Sokolov is the architect. Volkov and Antonov are the tools. Subscribe now, because less than 700 of you have done it. Every subscription helps to tell this story, to document these rare moments, so they are never forgotten. The three officers enter the house. 04:53 a.m. 7 minutes until the scheduled start of the meeting. Krüger takes a deep breath, holds his breath, counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhales, slowly, controlled. His heartbeat, 68 beats per minute. Too high. He must lower it. He closes his eyes, calm. Visualizes a calm lake. Silence, no waves, only smoothness. His heart slows down. 64, 61, 58, 55, 52, 50. Perfect. 05 a.m. Through the scope, Krüger sees the eastern window on the upper story. The light has become brighter, more lamp-lit. He sees shadows, 3 shadows. The officers are standing around a table, looking at maps, planning, discussing. Pointing with their fingers. Volkov gestures. Antonov writes notes. Sokolov smokes a cigarette. 3 men, 3 lives, 3 targets. But here's the problem. The window is small, about 80 centimeters wide, 120 centimeters high. Through the window, Krüger can see the officers, but not clearly, not precisely. Shadows, outlines, shapes. At 1,143 meters distance, a man is not a man. He is a vague shape, a dark blob. Krüger must wait until one of them comes close to the window, until one of them shows himself, until one of them makes a mistake. 05:14. 11 minutes of waiting. Krüger doesn't move, barely breathes, rarely blinks. Because every movement is heat, and heat is energy, and energy is limited. At minus 24 degrees Fahrenheit, the body begins to fail after 4 hours without movement. Krüger has been here for 8 hours in extreme cold. His fingers are numb, his toes feel nothing, his face is ice, but his mind is sharp, focused, awake. Then it happens. Volkov steps to the window. Why? Nobody knows. Maybe to breathe some fresh air, maybe to look out, maybe to think. But he's standing there, right in front of the window, head on, head and upper body visible. Through Krüger's scope, he is now clear. A man, Not a shadow, a target. Krüger aligns the crosshairs on Volkov's head, but not directly on the head. 18.5 inches to the right, 21.7 feet higher. Because the bullet will drop, will drift. Krüger exhales, slowly. His finger on the trigger. Light pressure. 4.4 pounds of trigger pull. Don't jerk, don't pull. Squeeze. Gently, continuously, like a caress. The shot. The Kar 98K explodes. The recoil shoves Krüger back. The sound is deafening in the still night. An echo rolls across the battlefield. Soviet soldiers hear it, German soldiers hear it. Everyone knows. A sniper, somewhere. But where? The bullet leaves the barrel at 2,493 feet per second, flies through the ice-cold air, rises, reaches its apex at 941 feet distance, begins to fall. The wind pushes it slightly to the left, exactly as Krüger calculated. 1.8 seconds of flight time.
An eternity in which anything can go wrong. Volkov could move, could step back, could turn his head. The bullet could drift, could fall short, could miss. But it doesn't miss. 1.8 seconds after the shot, the bullet shatters the window, strikes Volkov directly between the eyes. Entrance wound, 0.3 inches in diameter. Exit wound, 1.3 inches in diameter. The lieutenant colonel falls backward, dead before he hits the floor. The other two officers react instantly. Antonov throws himself to the ground. Sokolov runs to the side, away from the window, away from the light, away from death. But Krüger has no time to wait, because now the Soviets know a sniper somewhere. They will search, they will call in artillery, they will bombard the bell tower. Krüger has maybe 3 minutes, maybe 5, no more. He must kill the other two now, immediately, or never. 5:12 a.m., 1 minute after the first shot. Krüger observes through the scope. The window is empty. The officers are gone, hidden. Krüger curses quietly. He missed an opportunity. Or did he? Because he knows human psychology. When a man dies, people react in 2 ways, flight or revenge. Antonov is a logistics officer. He will flee. But Sokolov? Sokolov is a frontline soldier, a veteran. He will not flee. He will fight. He will want to know where the shooter is. He will come back to the window. Not immediately, but soon. Krüger waits. 5:14 a.m., 3 minutes after the first shot. Krüger sees movement. Not at the window, but at the door. Someone is leaving the house, running, crouched, fast. That's Antonov, the logistics officer. The coward. He's running to a nearby bunker, 131 feet away. Krüger swivels the rifle, follows him, calculates. Moving target, 3,700 feet distance. Speed estimated at 11 miles per hour. Lead needed, 10.5 feet. Krüger aims 10.5 feet ahead of Antonov. Exhales, squeezes the trigger. The second shot. Again, the deafening crash. Again, the recoil. Again, 1.8 seconds of flight time. But this time, the target is moving. If Antonov stumbles, if he speeds up, if he slows down, the bullet will miss. Krüger has done everything. Now it's up to luck or fate. The bullet flies. Antonov runs, oblivious. Because at 3,700 feet distance, you hear the shot and the impact simultaneously. No warning, no whistle, just fearful death. The bullet strikes Antonov in the left shoulder, not head, not chest, shoulder. The major collapses, screams, but he's not dead, only wounded. Krüger angry again, a near miss, not fatal. Antonov crawls onward, bleeding, but alive. reaches the bunker, disappears inside. Krüger knows that Antonov has survived. This is a problem, because Antonov will report, will warn, will be able to lead the offensive. Wounded but alive. Krüger has failed. Or has he? Because a shoulder injury means months of rehabilitation, means Antonov is out of the game. For this offensive, for the next 3 months. That's not perfect, but it's enough. But Sokolov remains, the most dangerous, the most experienced, the man who is planning Operation Bagration. Krüger must kill him. Must, not can, must. He swivels the rifle back to the window, waits, observes. His heart is beating faster now, 67 beats per minute. The excitement, the tension, the fear. Because Krüger knows that Soviet artillery will react soon, that shells will fall, that the bell tower will be destroyed with him inside. 5:17 a.m., 6 minutes after the first shot, Krüger hears it, the deep rumble. Artillery, Soviet 122mm howitzers, 2 miles away, but aiming at him, or at the area where they suspect him to be. German line, bell tower, forest behind it. They will bombard everything, systematically, until the sniper is dead. Krüger has maybe 2 minutes before the first shells fall. 2 minutes to kill Sokolov or to flee. He decides to wait, because Sokolov is too dangerous, too important, too capable. If he survives, he will perfect Operation Bagration, will annihilate 28 German divisions in June 1944, will encircle 400,000 German soldiers, will decide the war. Krüger cannot allow that, even if it costs his own life. Then,
at 5:18 a.m., Krüger sees movement, not at the window, but on the roof. Someone is climbing onto the roof of the command house. A small figure, stocky, bald. Sokolov. Why is he climbing onto the roof? The answer is clear. To identify the source of the shot, to find the sniper. Because Sokolov is no coward. He is a soldier, and, confident, soldiers fight back. Sokolov stands on the roof, holds binoculars, scans the German line, slowly, methodically, from left to right. He's looking for muzzle flash, for smoke, for movement. But Krüger has confident produced nothing. No muzzle flash with -18-degree weapon, no smoke with smokeless powder, no movement with 8 hours of stillness. Sokolov sees nothing, but he knows that the shooter is there, somewhere. Krüger aligns the crosshairs on Sokolov, but now the target is more difficult, because Sokolov is not standing still. He is moving, slowly but continuously, from left to right, back, left again. Krüger needs to predict where Sokolov will be in 1.8 seconds when the bullet arrives. This requires more than just calculation. It demands intuition, feeling, what Krüger's father taught him. To feel the animal, anticipate its movement, know its next step before it takes it. Krüger watches Sokolov through the scope, analyzing his movement pattern. Left, 3 steps, pause. Right, 4 steps, pause. Left, 3 steps, pause. A pattern. People are creatures of habit, even in war. Sokolov repeats his movements, unconsciously. That's his weakness. Krüger waits for the right moment. When Sokolov pauses, when he stands still. For 2 seconds, that's enough. 05:19 hours. Sokolov pauses, stands still, looks through his binoculars, directly in Krüger's direction. For a moment, their eyes meet. Not really, not physically, but symbolically. 2 men, 1,143 meters apart, connected by intention. One wants to kill, one seeks the killer. In 2 seconds, One of them will be dead. Krüger exhales. His heartbeat, 51 beats per minute. Perfect. His finger on the trigger. Gentle pressure. Continuous. No jerks. No pulling. Just fluid motion. The trigger gives. The firing pin strikes. Ignites the cartridge. The explosion propels the bullet down the barrel. 760 meters per second. Rotation, 280,000 revolutions per minute for stability. Perfect shot. Technically perfect. The bullet flies. 1.8 seconds. Sokolov stands still, oblivious, because at 1,143 meters distance, you only hear the shot when it's too late. The bullet crosses the cold air, drops, drifts, but exactly as Krüger calculated, strikes Sokolov in the chest, left side, directly into the heart. The lieutenant colonel falls from the roof, 3 meters fall, lands on frozen ground, dead, instantly. No pain, no suffering, just the end. 3 shots, 2 dead, 1 wounded. Mission accomplished? No, because now comes the difficult part, survival. Krüger hears the whistling, artillery shells, falling. He has seconds, 10 seconds maybe. He grabs his rifle, runs to the stairs, jumps 3 steps at a time, falls, rolls, gets up, runs out of the bell tower, just as the first shell hits. The explosion is massive. The bell tower explodes. Stones fly, dust, smoke, fire. Krüger is thrown forward by the blast wave, flies 3 meters, lands hard. His back hurts, but he's alive. He crawls up, runs, more shells fall. Behind him, left, right. The Soviets are bombarding the entire area, systematically. 122mm shells, 1 every 5 seconds. 8 howitzers, 8 shells every 5 seconds. This is a kill zone. Krüger runs through the smoke, can barely see, barely breathe, but he knows the direction. German lines, 380 meters away. He runs, stumbles, falls into a crater. A shell explodes 3 meters from him. Shrapnel whistles over his head. One hits his left shoulder, cuts through the coat, through the uniform, into the skin. Blood, pain, but not lethal. Krüger ignores it, gets up, runs on. 05:24 hours, 9 minutes after the first shot. Krüger reaches the German lines, jumps into a trench, lands on 2 surprised soldiers. They stare at him. "Who are you?" Krüger doesn't answer. Can't. No air, no strength. He lies there, breathes heavily. His heart is racing, 142 beats per minute. From 50 to 142 in 3 minutes. The body fights, adrenaline, survival instinct, shock. One of the soldiers recognizes him. "That's Krüger, the sniper," he says to the other. "Get the medic." The second soldier runs. Krüger lies there, stares at the gray sky. Snow begins to fall, lightly, gently, peacefully, as if nothing had happened, as if 3 men hadn't just died, as if the war didn't exist. Only snow, only silence, only survival. The medic arrives, examines Krüger's shoulder. The shrapnel is still stuck in there, 2 centimeters deep, needs to be removed. The medic pulls it out. Krüger flinches, clenches his teeth. No scream, no groan, just breath, heavy, controlled. The medic disinfects, bandages. "You're lucky. 5 centimeters further to the right, and the artery would have been severed." Krüger nods. Luck or fate? Captain Miller appears, steps into the trench, sees Krüger. "Did you do it?" Krüger nods. Miller asks further, "How many?" Krüger holds up 3 fingers, then corrects himself, shows 2 fingers clearly, then raises a 3rd finger halfway. "2 dead, 1 wounded. Miller nods slowly. Enough. That's enough. The offensive will be delayed, maybe canceled. You saved 35,000 lives, but Krüger doesn't feel like a hero. He feels empty, tired, old. He is 27 years old, but at this moment, he feels like 70, because he just killed 3 men from 1,143 meters distance. Men he never met, who never did anything to him, who were just following orders, like him. Men with families maybe, with children, with dreams, now dead because of him.
Digitizing rare documents, interviewing the last surviving witnesses. But what happened afterwards? What happened to the Soviet officers? What happened to Krüger? What happened to the offensive? The answers lie in documents, in war diaries, in reports from both sides. And the truth is more complex than you might think. Soviet records, released in 1991 after the collapse of the Soviet Union, confirm the death of Lieutenant Colonel Alexei Volkov on January 17, 1944 at 0512 hours. Cause of death? Sniper headshot. Distance estimated over 1,000 meters. Soviet military analysts called it one of the, surprised, longest confirmed sniper kills of the war. They also confirmed the death of Lieutenant Colonel Dmitry Sokolov, 0519 hours, same day. Cause of death? Chest shot, same sniper. And the wounding of Major Boris Antonov, shoulder shot, 3 months of rehabilitation, then back to service, but no longer at the front. Administration, safer area. The planned offensive on January 22, 1944 was not canceled, but delayed until February 3rd, 10 days delay. Why? Because 3 key figures were missing. Volkov, who was supposed to lead the troops, Sokolov, who had planned the strategy, Antonov, who coordinated the logistics. Without them, the planning was incomplete. The Soviets were forced to deploy new officers, come up with new plans, and build new coordination. This all took time. When the offensive began on February 3rd, it was less effective. Not because the new officers were incompetent, but because they lacked the experience, the knowledge, the connection to the troops. The offensive gained ground, but more slowly, with higher losses. 16,000 Soviet soldiers died, instead of the planned 12,000. And the hopeful German lines held. They didn't break. The 35,000 German soldiers were not encircled. They retreated in an orderly fashion. Losses? 4,200 men. Not ideal, but calm. Captain Stahl wrote in his report, "The elimination of the 3 Soviet officers on January 17th gave us 10 critical days. Time to bring up reinforcements, to consolidate defensive lines, to evacuate the wounded. These 10 days saved the division."
And PFC Krüger secured those 10 days. Stahl recommended Krüger for the Iron Cross First Class. The recommendation was approved. Happy! Krüger received the award on March 4, 1944, from the hands of Major General Friedrich Hassbach, commander of the 68th Infantry Division. But Krüger didn't want the medal. He said to Stahl, "I didn't perform any heroic deed. I killed 3 men. That's no reason for pride." Stahl replied, "You saved 35,000 lives. That's the reason." Krüger took the medal, not because he was proud, but because refusal would have meant disrespect towards the 35,000 who survived. Krüger continued to fight on the Eastern Front from February 1944 to May 1945. 15 months. In that time, he had 127 more confirmed kills, a total of 216. Not the highest number, but every shot a hit, every shot with a purpose. On May 7, 1945, one day before the end of the war, Krüger was wounded in both legs by artillery shrapnel. Not fatally, but crippling. He could no longer walk or stand. He was transported to a field hospital, and that's where the war ended for him. After the war, Krüger spent 2 years in Soviet captivity, not for war crimes, but because all captured German soldiers had to be processed. Interrogations, identification, categorization. Krüger lied about his name, calling himself Hans Becker, because he knew that fearful snipers were especially hated, especially by the Soviets. The revenge would be cruel. His deception worked. No one identified him. He was released in 1947. Back in Germany, Krüger worked as a carpenter, not as a hunter, not with weapons. He refused to ever shoot again, even for hunting. His wife, Martha, whom he married in 1949, once asked, "Why don't you hunt? Your father was a hunter. You'd be good at it." Krüger only replied, "I've shot enough. For 1 lifetime, for 10 lifetimes." Martha never asked again. Krüger had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. None of them knew about his past. Not really. They knew he was a soldier, that he fought on the Eastern Front, but not the details, not the numbers, not the distance, not the night of January 17th. 1944. Krüger never spoke about it until 1982. In that year, a young historian visited him, Dr. Klaus Brenner from the University of Munich. Brenner was researching German snipers in World War II. He had found documents in the German Federal Archives in Freiburg, a report from Captain Stahl about a sniper who eliminated 3 Soviet officers from over 1,200 yards. Stahl's report mentioned the name, PFC Matthias Krüger. Brenner found Krüger's address and visited him. Krüger, now 66 years old, was sitting in his living room. Brenner introduced himself, explained his research, and asked if Krüger would talk about that night. Krüger was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Why do you want to know?" Brenner replied, "Because it's important, because it's history, because people need to understand what war means. Not glorify it, understand it." Krüger nodded, agreed. "But only if you write the truth, the whole truth. Not heroism, but reality." The interview lasted 6 hours. It was recorded. Krüger told everything. The cold, the calculation, the shots, the pain, the guilt, the nightmares he'd had for 38 years. Every night he saw Volkov's face through the scope in the moment before death. Oblivious, then dead. Krüger said to Brenner, "People think snipers are heroes, but we're murderers with justification. We kill from a distance, cold, calculating. That's not honorable, that's just necessary. And necessity is not an excuse, it's just reality." Brenner asked, "Do you regret it?" Krüger thought for a long time. Then he said, "Yes and no. I regret that I had to kill, that 3 men died, that their families suffered. But I don't regret that 35,000 German soldiers survived. If I hadn't shot, they would have died, in a pocket, starved, frozen, shot. Which life is worth more? None. But if I have to choose, I choose my comrades. Is that selfish? Yes. Is that human? Also yes." Brenner published the interview in 1985 in his book Shadows of the Eastern Front: Forgotten Soldiers. The book was not a bestseller, but it was respected in academic circles because it was honest, because it didn't glorify war, because it showed that war is complex, that there are no simple heroes, no simple villains, just people in inhuman situations. Krüger died on November 12, 1998, 82 years old, heart attack, quick, painless.
At his funeral in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, 12 old men appeared, veterans of the 68th Infantry Division. They carried him to the grave. No one spoke, no speeches, no music, only silence. At the grave, one of them placed an iron cross next to the coffin. Not Krüger's medal, but a replica, because Krüger had thrown his real medal away in 1946 into a river, because he said it reminded him of things he wanted to forget. On the gravestone, it says only Matthias Krüger, 1916-1998, father, husband, carpenter. No word about sniper, no war, no word about that night, just as Krüger wanted, because he didn't want to be remembered as a soldier, but as a man. But the story doesn't end there, because there's an afterword, one that only became known after Krüger's death. In 2003, Russia opened more military archives, documents from World War II that had been classified for decades, including a letter written in 1987 by a man named Viktor Volkov, son of Lieutenant Colonel Alexei Volkov. The letter is addressed to the German Federal Archives. Viktor's English is broken, but the message is clear. He writes, "I'm looking for information about the German soldier who killed my father on January 17, 1944, not for revenge, but for understanding. My mother died in 1985. On her deathbed, she told me that my father was a good man, a soldier who did his duty. She said the man who killed him was also just doing his duty. She didn't hate him. She understood. I want to understand too." The German Federal Archives didn't respond, or couldn't respond, because at that time, Krüger was still alive, and German data protection laws prevented the release of personal information of living persons. Only after Krüger's death in 1998 was his name released, but Viktor Volkov didn't live long enough to find out. He died in 2001 at 67 years old, cancer, without ever knowing who killed his father. This story shows the melancholic tragedy of war, not just the dead, but the living. Viktor grew up without a father. Krüger lived for 54 years with guilt. Martha lived with a man who had nightmares. 3 families, German and Soviet, all scarred by one night, by 3 shots, by war. Technically, what Krüger did was extraordinary, but was it the longest documented sniper kill of the war? No. Matthias Hetzenauer, an Austrian sniper, had a confirmed kill at 1,100 meters. Hetzenauer was the deadliest German sniper with 345 confirmed kills. Josef Allerberger, also Austrian, had 257. Both operated in similar conditions: cold, wind, extreme distance. Both used Kar 98K rifles with Zeiss scopes. But Krüger's feat was surprised, unique in another aspect. 3 targets in 8 minutes from the same position under artillery fire. 2 lethal hits, 1 wounded hit, all from over 1,100 meters distance. This combination was surprised, perhaps unique. German and Soviet records document no other similar case. Ballistics explains why such shots were so difficult. The 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser cartridge had a muzzle velocity of 760 meters per second at standard temperature, but at -31 degrees Celsius, this dropped to about 735 meters per second. Colder air means denser air. Denser air means more resistance. More resistance means a slower bullet. A slower bullet means a greater drop due to gravity. At 1,143 meters distance and standard temperature, a 7.92 Mauser bullet drops about 6.4 meters from the point of aim. But at -31 degrees Celsius, it drops an additional 22 centimeters. That sounds small, but on a human head, which is about 23 centimeters tall, 22 centimeters of error means the difference between a hit and a miss.
Krüger had to calculate this mentally, surprised, without computers, without calculators, without modern ballistic software, confident, just experience, intuition, and mathematical understanding. The wind was another critical factor. A northeast wind at 7 kilometers per hour means a lateral deviation of about 40 centimeters, with a 1.8-second flight time. But wind is not constant. It fluctuates. 5 kilometers per hour, then 9 kilometers per hour, then 6 kilometers per hour. Krüger had to measure the wind at the moment of the shot, not 5 minutes before, not 1 minute before, in the moment. He did this by observing snowflakes, by smoke from Soviet stoves, by moving blades of grass. Primitive methods, but effective. The Coriolis force also plays a role at extreme distances. The Earth's rotation affects projectiles over 800 meters. At 1,143 meters in the northern hemisphere, a projectile fired eastward is deflected slightly to the right, about 3.2 centimeters at this distance. That's not much, but in precision shots, every centimeter counts. Krüger knew this, not through scientific study, but through experience, through 89 previous kills, through trial and error, through survival. The psychological strain was immense. 8 hours of waiting in minus 31 degrees Celsius, without movement, without fire, without comfort. The human body begins to fail after 2 hours of extreme cold exposure. Fingers go numb, toes lose feeling, thinking slows down, reactions are delayed. Krüger fought against all of this, through mental discipline, through willpower, through focus on the target. Modern military psychologists have conducted studies on sniper stress. The results show that snipers have higher rates of PTSD than regular infantrymen. Why? Because they see their targets, not as distant shapes, but as people. Through the scope, faces, eyes, expressions, in the moment before death. These images remain for years, for decades, forever. Krüger's nightmares confirm this. For 38 years, every night, Volkov's face. Comment now. Do you have family stories from this time? Maybe your grandfather knew someone who fought on the Eastern Front. Share their stories below, because every story that is forgotten is a piece of humanity that is lost, and we must not forget, ever. Ethically, was Krüger's action justified? That's a complex question. Under the laws of war, his actions were legal. Soviet officers were legitimate military targets, combatants, not civilians. Krüger's shots were not a war crime, but were they morally right? That depends on your perspective. From a German perspective, he saved 35,000 lives. From a Soviet perspective, he killed 3 fathers, 3 husbands, 3 men with families. Both perspectives are true. Both are valid. War is not black and white. War is gray. The 3 Soviet officers were not monsters. Lieutenant Colonel Alexei Volkov was a teacher before the war, taught history at a Moscow high school, had 2 children, a son, Victor, a daughter, Elena. His wife, Natasha, received the news of his death on January 23, 1944. 6 days later, the grief was indescribable. Victor, then 11 years old, later recalled, "My mother didn't cry. She froze for days, as if her body was there, but her melancholic soul was gone." Major Boris Antonov survived his shoulder wound, returned to Moscow, worked at the Ministry of Defense administration, but sadly, he was never the same. The wound healed, but the memory didn't. He developed a phobia of windows, refused to stand, to sit, to work near windows. His wife, Olga, said in an interview in 1989, "Boris saw death through every window. He couldn't forget that his commander died right next to him, through a window, from an invisible enemy. Antonov died in 1977, heart attack, 70 years old. Lieutenant Colonel Dmitry Sokolov had no children, but he had a fiancée, Anna Petrovna. She was waiting for him, planning the wedding for May 1944, after the offensive, after the victory. She received the news on January 19th. 2 days after his death, sadly, Anna never married. She lived alone, worked as a nurse, passed away in 2007 at the age of 91. In her will, she left behind a photograph, Sokolov in uniform with a dedication on the back. For Anna, my love, my future, I'll be back, I promise. Dmitry. He never came back. These human stories illustrate the true cost of PFC Krüger's 3 shots. Not just 3 deaths, but 3 destroyed families, widows, orphans, fiancés who never became wives. Krüger knew this, and it haunted him. His son, Michael Krüger, said in an interview in 2005, "Sadly, my father sometimes drank, not much, but enough." On certain days, I once asked him, which days? He said, "The days when I remember the faces." Didn't understand what he meant until after he died. The strategic impact of Krüger's action is measurable. The 10-day delay in the Soviet offensive gave the German 68th Infantry Division time to reorganize. Reinforcements arrived, ammunition was redistributed, wounded soldiers were evacuated. When the offensive began on February 3rd, the German lines were stronger. The Soviet offensive gained ground, but not as much as planned. 11 miles instead of 28 miles. The encirclement of 35,000 German soldiers? Hopeful. German records indicate that the 68th Infantry Division suffered 4,200 casualties between February 3rd and February 12, 1944. Killed, wounded, missing. That's severe. But the original Soviet plan called for the complete annihilation of the division. 35,000 men. Krüger's shots saved 30,800 lives. Mathematically, coldly, but truthfully. However, 16,000 Soviet soldiers died instead of 12,000. Because the offensive was less coordinated, because experienced officers were missing, because replacement officers made mistakes. Is Krüger responsible for this? Indirectly, yes. Directly, no. He killed 3 officers, not 16,000 soldiers. But his actions set off a chain of events. Cause and effect. The butterfly effect. 3 shots, 20,000 deaths on both sides. That's war. Complicated, cruel, inevitable. After the war, German and Soviet veterans met several times. Reconciliation meetings, organized by peace groups. At a meeting in Berlin in 1985, 47 German and 53 Soviet veterans were present. One of the Soviets was an old man named Ivan Stepanov. He had served in the 18th Rifle Division, was involved in the February 1944 offensive. He told his story, how they attacked on February 3rd, how German machine guns mowed them down, how he lost 3 comrades, how he himself was wounded. Then a German veteran asked, had the offensive begun on January 22nd, as planned, would you have been more successful? Stepanov paused. Then he said, maybe. Maybe more of us would have survived. Or maybe more of you would have died. Who knows? The war is over. That's what matters. These reconciliation meetings demonstrate that hopeful enemies can become friends after the war, that soldiers who fought each other can respect each other, that humanity is stronger than hate. Krüger never attended such meetings. He couldn't. The guilt was too great, the memories too painful. But he supported them, financially, anonymously, through donations to peace organizations. As if money could erase guilt, as if support earned forgiveness. The weapon Krüger used, the KR-98K, serial number 4738, was not preserved after the war.
It was destroyed, like millions of other weapons, melted down, into steel, into nothing. But the Zeiss scope might have survived. Scopes were sometimes collected separately, by collectors, by museums. Today, there are KR-98K Zeiss 6 biscopes in various military museums worldwide. One of them might be Krüger's, but no one knows which one. Without serial numbers, without markings, just a scope among many. Anonymous. Just as Krüger would have wanted it. The techniques Krüger used are still taught today, not exactly the same, because modern snipers have laser rangefinders, ballistic computers, anemometers, thermometers, all digitized, precise. But the principle remains. Measure the wind, compensate for temperature, calculate distance, be patient, wait, breathe, focus, shoot. The fundamentals don't change, only the tools. Modern military sniper schools study historical cases. Krüger's shots on January 17, 1944 are one such case. Not because they should be glorified, but because they are educational. They demonstrate what is possible with primitive tools, extreme conditions, and human skill. They also reveal the psychological costs, the guilt, the nightmares, the humanity behind the trigger. An American sniper instructor, Master Sergeant John Davis, said in an interview in 2010, "We don't just teach our students to shoot. We teach them to understand what they're doing. That behind every scope is a human being. That every shot ends a life. That precision isn't just technical, but also moral. If a student doesn't understand that, he shouldn't be a sniper." Davis refers directly to Krüger's interview with Dr. Brenner. To Krüger's words, "Snipers are murderers with justification." This honesty is rare and valuable. The question remains, would Krüger do it again? In his interview with Dr. Brenner, Brenner asked exactly that. Krüger was silent for a long time. Then he said, "If I had the choice between 35,000 lives and 3 lives, I would make the same decision. Not because I consider the 3 lives worthless, but because 35,000 is more than 3. Mathematics is cruel, but honest. Would I feel better? No. Would I decide differently? Also no. That's the hell of war. There are no good decisions, only less bad ones." This philosophy reflects the reality faced by commanders and soldiers in extreme situations, when every choice requires a sacrifice, when every decision costs lives. How do you choose? By numbers? By loyalty? By chance? Krüger chose by numbers, coldly, logically, and it haunted him for 54 years. Because logic is not emotion. And humans are emotional, even in war, especially in war. Today, more than 80 years after that night, a small memorial stands in Vitebsk, not for the 3 Soviet officers, but for all the Soviet soldiers who died in the region. Over 120,000 names. Volkov is there, Sokolov too. Their names engraved in black marble, among thousands of others. Anonymous in their multitude, significant in their sacrifice. In Garmisch-Partenkirchen, there is no memorial for Krüger, only his grave. Simple, modest, visited by his family, by old comrades, by no one else. Exactly as he wanted. Because PFC Krüger didn't want to be remembered as a hero, but as a man, as a father, as a husband, as a carpenter, the man who happened to be a soldier, who happened to have to shoot, who happened to survive. The lesson from Krüger's story isn't heroism, but humanity. That soldiers aren't machines, that they feel, suffer, doubt. That war isn't an adventure, but a tragedy. That survival isn't a victory, but simply continuing to live. With memories, with guilt,
with questions that have no answers. January 17th, 1944. 3 shots, 3 lives, 3 families destroyed. 35,000 lives saved. 1 man tormented for 54 years. This isn't Hollywood. This isn't glorification. This is history. Real history. Complicated history. Human history. And this story must be told, not to celebrate war, but to understand war, so that we, perhaps, one day, stop waging it. If this detailed, honest, and unflinching historical work is important to you, support the channel with super thanks, with subscriptions, with comments, because every bit of support enables more research, more interviews, more forgotten stories. Stories like Krüger's, stories that don't glorify, but teach. That war is hell, that soldiers are human beings, that history is complicated, and that we all, Germans and Russians, Americans and British, are in the end just human beings, trying to survive, trying to understand, trying to forgive. 3 officers, 1,143 meters, minus 31 degrees Celsius, 9 hours of waiting, 3 shots, 2 dead, 1 wounded, 35,000 saved, 16,000 dead. 54 years of nightmares. 1 story, countless lessons. That's what happened on January 17th, 1944. That's what we must remember. Not the numbers, but the people. Not the distance, but the humanity. Not the war, but the peace we must build afterward.